You're standing at the meat counter. The label says grass-fed, natural, premium, farm-raised. You reach for the one that costs $11 more because those words have to mean something. Here's what I found after months of digging. Most of the words on that sticker mean nothing at all. Not very little. Nothing. And once I learned which three actually matter, I stopped overpaying for beef forever. I first got suspicious in a grocery store in Ohio, standing over two steaks that looked identical, cut from the same animal, priced $4 apart because one had a fancier word printed on the plastic. Somebody decided that word was worth $4. I wanted to know who. The trail I followed goes back to a government decision made in January of 2016, buried in a document almost nobody read. And I promise you this, everything I'm about to show you, you can use on your very next trip to the store with no special knowledge and no extra money. So let me start with the word that fooled me the longest, natural. It's on nearly every package in the case. It sounds like a promise about how the animal lived, what it ate, whether it was treated with anything. That's exactly what I assumed for years. So I went looking for the official definition straight from the United States Department of Agriculture, the agency that approves these labels. And what I read stopped me cold. By the government's own rules, natural on a meat package means only two things. The meat is minimally processed, and it contains no artificial ingredients or added color. That's it. That is the entire definition. It says absolutely nothing about how the animal was raised, nothing about its diet, nothing about hormones, nothing about antibiotics, nothing about whether it ever saw a blade of grass or a patch of open sky. Think about what that means. Raw steak is, by definition, minimally processed and has no artificial coloring, so a plain piece of raw beef is natural no matter what. Every single steak in that case qualifies. They just choose which packages to print the word on, and they charge you more for the ones that carry it. I stood there realizing I'd been paying a premium for a word that describes literally all raw meat. But if natural was a hollow word, I figured the next one had to be real. It was the label I trusted most of all. That word was grass-fed. And this is where the trail turns strange. Because grass-fed sounds airtight. You picture cattle in a green pasture, eating the way nature intended. And for a while there really were federal standards behind it. But then I found the date. On January 12th, 2016, the U.S. Department of Agriculture officially withdrew its grass-fed marketing claim standard. Withdrew it. The government rulebook that defined what grass-fed was supposed to mean got pulled off the table. So what happened after that? The companies got to define the term themselves. Each producer decides what grass-fed means for their own product. There's no single federal standard forcing them to agree. One company's grass-fed can mean the animal grazed on pasture its whole life. Another's can mean something far looser. And here's the part that really got me. Cattle can be fed grass and still be finished on grain, and the labeling around all this got murky the moment that standard disappeared. Unless the package carries a separate verified claim, the plain words grass-fed don't guarantee what you think they guarantee. I sat with that for a long time. A working standard existed. It got quietly withdrawn. And the people left holding the definition were the very companies profiting from the label. That's a pattern I'd see again and again as I kept pulling this thread. Because the next word cost people the most money of all, and it's practically a religion in this country. Angus. You've seen it 1,000 times. Angus burgers, Angus steaks. It's printed like a badge of honor, and people pay extra for it without a second thought. So I asked the simplest question, what does Angus actually mean? And the answer is almost funny. Angus is a breed of cattle. That's all it is. Specifically, it usually refers to cattle with a solid black hide. The word Angus on its own tells you about the color of the animal's skin. It tells you nothing by itself about the tenderness, the marbling, or the flavor of the steak in your hand. Let me be careful here, because there's a real thing and a fake thing living under the same word, and telling them apart will save you real money. Plain Angus on a label is close to meaningless as a quality promise. Any black-hided animal qualifies. But there is a genuine brand, certified Angus beef, created back in 1978, and that one is different. To carry that specific certified stamp, the beef has to pass 10 separate quality standards, covering marbling, size, and consistency. That trademark actually means something. The bare word Angus, printed loose on a package with no certification behind it, is mostly there to make you reach for it. And reach you do, because it sounds premium, so one of my 3 keepers was starting to take shape. But before I get to the labels worth trusting, I had to follow the money into the most expensive corner of the whole meat case, where a single word can add $100 to your bill. That word is Kobe, and right beside it, Wagyu. These are the luxury words. You see Kobe sliders on a menu, Kobe burgers, Wagyu this and Wagyu that, and the price makes your eyes water. So I traced where real Kobe beef even comes from. True Kobe is an extremely specific product from a particular region of Japan, from a particular bloodline of cattle, raised under strict rules. And here's the detail that stunned me. For years, real Kobe beef was essentially not even available in the United States. Imports of Japanese beef were restricted, and the door didn't really open until around 2012. So during all those years when Kobe was splashed across menus from coast to coast, the genuine article was barely here at all. So what were people actually eating? In most cases, a domestic crossbreed. American Wagyu is very often Wagyu cattle crossed with regular cattle, which can still be a fine steak, but it is not the mythical thing the word implies. And Kobe on an American burger has, for years, frequently been marketing language rather than a guarantee of that rare Japanese product. People were paying luxury prices for a word attached to something far more ordinary. I remember reading the account of how few restaurants in the entire country could truthfully claim to serve real Kobe during that early period, and it was a tiny handful. Everyone else was selling the idea of it. That's when the shape of the whole thing hit me. This wasn't a series of accidents. Over and over, the most emotional, most trusted words on the label were the ones with the least behind them. Natural describes all raw meat. Grass-fed lost its federal standard. Angus describes a hide color. Kobe was barely even here. Somebody, across the whole industry, learned that the right word in the right spot on a package makes you open your wallet wider. And nobody profits when you finally figure out that the plain steak next to it, $4 cheaper, might be exactly as good. But the label that made me the angriest wasn't about flavor at all. It was about where your meat was even born. Here's the clue that set me off. For years, you could buy a package stamped Product of USA, feel good about supporting American ranchers, and be completely wrong. Because of a loophole I could hardly believe when I first read it, meat could be labeled Product of USA even if the animal was born and raised in another country entirely. As long as the meat was processed or repackaged here past a certain point, that all-American label could go right on the package. The animal could have lived its whole life somewhere else. The stamp still said USA. Think about who that helped. It let large processors buy cheaper foreign product, run it through a domestic step, and sell it under a label that let them charge the trust of American shoppers. The rancher down the road, raising cattle from birth on American soil, was competing against imported meat wearing the same flag on its sticker. This got so obvious that the U.S. Department of Agriculture finally moved to fix it. In March of 2024, the agency finalized a new rule stating that the voluntary Product of USA claim can only be used when the animal was born, raised, slaughtered, and processed in the United States. A real fix, but it took until then, and the compliance window stretches further still, which means for a long, long time that label was doing the opposite of what you believed. Now, I know exactly what some of you are thinking right about now. You're thinking this is all fine for somebody with money to burn and a fancy butcher on speed dial, but you shop sales, you feed a family, and you can't afford to gamble on steak. I thought the same thing when I started. I figured the good stuff was locked behind a high price no matter what the label said. So let me hand you something you can use this week. Standing right there in an ordinary grocery store with nothing but your own two eyes. Look for the shield, the little shield-shaped stamp that says USDA and a grade word, prime, choice, or select. This is one of the 3 labels that is absolutely worth it, and here's why I trust it when I don't trust the others. Beef grading by the U.S. Department of Agriculture goes all the way back to 1927, and it is based on real, physical inspection of the meat itself, mainly the marbling, those fine threads of fat running through the muscle. Prime is the top with the most marbling, and it's genuinely rare, only a small share of all graded beef. Choice is the solid middle. Select is leaner and can be tougher. That shield doesn't describe the animal's hide or the marketing department's imagination. It describes the actual steak. So instead of paying extra for the word premium, which means nothing, you look for a choice shield, which means something specific and verified. And here's the thrifty part I love. A choice steak on sale will often beat a full-price steak plastered with fluffy words and no grade at all. You're buying the inspection, not the adjective. But grading was only the first of my 3 keepers, and the second one is the label the companies fought the hardest against, which is exactly how I knew it was real. That second keeper is the USDA, Organic Seal. Now, I was skeptical of this one too because organic gets thrown around loosely on everything from cereal to shampoo, but on meat, that specific green and white USDA, Organic Seal, is different from a plain word because it's backed by a federal program with actual rules and required inspections. For beef to carry it, the standards reach into how the animal was raised, its feed, and the prohibition of certain substances. It's not a word a marketing team can simply print because it sounds nice. It has to be certified, and that certification can be checked. That's the difference that matters in this whole investigation. Before I keep pulling this thread, I want to mention something for anyone who wants the full breakdown in one place. I put everything I know about reading labels, cutting waste, and eating well without getting fooled into a set of guides called Meat Smart, Deep Frugal, and the Full System, and you can find them linked in the description. They go deeper than any single video ever could, covering the kind of quiet, honest methods that got crowded out by marketing words. All right, back to the trail, because there's still one more keeper on my list, and this is the one that separates the honest, premium words from the hollow ones. Some labels are just words anybody can print. Other labels are backed by a defined standard and someone checking behind them. Natural is a word. The Organic Seal is a standard. Grass-fed, on its own, lost its standard back in that 2016 withdrawal. The Organic Seal kept its teeth. So when you're deciding where your extra dollar should go, you're really asking one question. Is there a rule book and an inspector behind this label, or is it just ink? But there was still one more keeper on my list, and this is the one that separates the honest, premium words from the hollow ones. The third label worth your money is a verified, certified claim, not a bare adjective. I'm talking about the certified Angus beef trademark with its 10 standards, or a grass-fed claim that carries a real third-party verification stamp, or no hormones administered on beef when it's properly documented. And that last one deserves a warning that saves you money instantly. On beef, no hormones added can mean something, because hormones are allowed in raising cattle. But on chicken and pork, federal rules already prohibit hormone use across the board. So when you see no hormones on a package of chicken, you are looking at a claim that's true of all chicken by law. They're charging you, in some cases, for a promise the law already made for free. Once I learned that, I couldn't unsee it in the poultry aisle. So let's tally where the trail had led me. Natural, empty, plain grass-fed, standard withdrawn, plain Angus, a hide color, Kobe, barely real for years, product of USA, a loophole until recently, no hormones on chicken, meaningless by law, and on the other side, 3 that hold up, the USDA grade shield, the USDA organic seal, and a genuinely certified claim with a rule book behind it. I thought I'd reached the end. I'd cracked the labels. But then I found the piece of evidence that changed everything, because it meant I didn't even need the expensive shield to eat like I'd bought it. Here's the thread that pulled it all together. I kept coming back to that word marbling, the real thing the grade shield measures, those fine veins of fat that make a steak tender and rich. And I found something in old cooking wisdom, the kind written down in home kitchens long before marketing departments existed, that food scientists have since confirmed. You can take a cheaper, lower-graded steak and dramatically improve both its tenderness and its flavor at home for free using nothing but salt, thyme, and your own refrigerator. The technique the steakhouses guard, the one behind those $100 dry-aged menu words, has a humble home version anybody can do. Let me tell you exactly what I did, because this is the part you can try this weekend. I took an ordinary choice steak, nothing fancy. I salted it well on all sides with plain, coarse salt. Then, instead of wrapping it in plastic, I set it on a wire rack over a plate uncovered and put it in the back of my refrigerator. I left it there, and the cold, dry air did the work. Over a day or two, the surface dried, and the salt worked inward, seasoning the meat all the way through and breaking down the fibers that make a steak tough. When I finally cooked it, that plain, cheap steak came out tender and deep-flavored, closer to the expensive stuff than I ever thought possible. A longer stay in the fridge, several days, deepens it even further. This is the same principle behind the dry aging you're being charged a fortune for. And here's the second half of the finale, the money-saving cut nobody points you to. Right there in the case, often at a fraction of the price of a ribeye, sits a cut called the chuck eye. It comes from right next to the ribeye, from the same general muscle region, and it carries much of that same rich flavor for a lot less money. Butchers have quietly called it the poor man's ribeye for generations. Combine that cheap chuck eye with the salt and refrigerator method I just described, and you can put a steak on your plate that shames the overpriced, overlabeled one you almost bought for a small share of the cost. Now step back and look at what that really means, because this is the whole heart of what I found. The grading system was built in 1927 to tell you the truth about the meat itself. Then, over the decades, a fog of words rolled in on top of it. Natural, premium, farm fresh. Words with no rule book, printed to make you spend more. The standard behind grass-fed got withdrawn in 2016. The product of USA loophole let foreign meat wear an American flag until 2024. And all the while, the honest tools, the grade shield, the real seal, and a cheap steak transformed by salt and cold air were sitting right there, quietly working, waiting for someone to remember them. That old home method, salt and thyme and cold, was never a secret. It was common kitchen knowledge, the kind of thing our grandmothers did without thinking, written into old household habits and later proven out by food science. It didn't get lost because it stopped working. It got crowded out by a case full of expensive words, because there's no profit in teaching you that a $2 handful of salt and a spot in your own fridge can do what a $100 label promises. Nobody sells you your own refrigerator twice. That's why the trick went quiet, and that's why it feels like a discovery when you find it again. So here's what I want you to carry out of this. The next time you stand at that meat counter, you're not going to be moved by natural, because now you know it describes every raw steak in the case. You're not going to pay $4 extra for a word with no rule book behind it. You're going to look for the shield, look for the real seal, look for the certified claim, and then walk your cheaper cut home and let salt and cold air make it magnificent. You didn't lose the ability to eat well. It was quietly priced out from under you, and now you've taken it back. If you've ever felt that quiet suspicion at the store, that sense that the fancy word on the package was engineered to reach into your pocket, you were right the whole time. You were never being cheap. You were being careful and the system was counting on you feeling embarrassed enough to overpay anyway. Trust that instinct. It's the same instinct that built every thrifty, self-reliant home this country ever had. Now I want to hear from you. Which one of these labels had you fooled the longest, the way natural fooled me? And here's the specific one I'm dying to know about. Have you ever paid extra for Kobe at a restaurant back before 2012 when the real thing was barely even in the country? Tell me in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from, because I read them, and your stories keep sending me down new trails. If you believe, like I do, that simple, honest methods got buried to protect somebody else's profit, then come with me, because that's the whole reason this trail exists, and following it back is exactly what we do here. And I'll leave you with one loose thread for next time. I've been digging into the eggs in your refrigerator and the stamped date on that carton, and I found something about how long an egg is actually good, tested with nothing but a bowl of water, that the date on the box would never tell you. That's where the trail goes next. Follow it with me, and let's take back one more thing they quietly priced out of your hands. This video showed you the worst offenders, but I couldn't fit everything. Inside the Old Ways Society, I decode all 10 labels, plus the 3 worth buying. And if a sticker still puzzles you, ask me directly. A real person, me, answers you, never a machine. You won't be doing this alone. Old Ways folks like you are already in there with me. Just point your phone's camera at the code. Cancel any time. Now that you know which labels to trust, let me show you a hidden cut most folks walk right past. It's tender, affordable, and truly delicious. That video is starting right here.